Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this session, we are going to talk about derived verbs. These are also called abwab mazid fi, and in English they are called derived verbs. All right. One basic point I want to make is that when we learn these derived verbs, we will also talk about the concept of a masdar. A masdar is the name of the action. Now, earlier when we talked about the six babs which were salati mujarrad. So the salati mujarrad six babs were babs like nasara yansuru, fataha yaftahu, etc. So in those six babs, when we learned a bab, we just said fataha yaftahu or nasara yansuru and so on. In learning the babs, we referred to the past tense form such as nasara, and then the present tense or fail mudare, which is yansuru. So saying nasara yansuru is what we did, and we did not really talk about the action. The reason we did not talk about the action, or we didn't remember the action, or didn't try to explicitly learn the action, is the pattern for the action varies from word to word. And let me just explain what I mean by that. So if we simply take nasara yansuru, so this is one bab nasara yansuru. With this bab alone, there are obviously many verbs that follow this particular pattern. So kharaja yakhruju, qa'ada yaqudu, saqata yasqutu. So there are many verbs obviously that fall under bab nasara. However, these different verbs will have different masdars, which means that the name of the actions follow a different pattern. So for example, kharaja yakhruju, the name of the action of sitting, or actually here kharaja yakhruju, this is the action of leaving, so to exit. So that action is called al-khuruj. The action of covering is described as satara yasturu. So that's the action, but the name of the action is as-satar. So notice between al-khuruj and as-satar, the masdar or the name of the action is following a different pattern. That's why when we say nasara yansuru, when we talk about this bab, we don't have a standard term for or a standard pattern for the masdar. Masdar again is the name of the action. However, when we talk about the abwab salasi mazid fi, so these are the derived verbs, and there are many different types of derived verbs, but the ones that we will focus on are these 8. When you look at a textbook that describes Arabic grammar in English, these verbs are called derived verbs, and then this one is, for example, called form 2, this is called form 4, and so on. But I'm not going to go into the form 4, form 2, etc. I'm just going to have you learn the names of these masdars, and then for every masdar, you need to know what the basic past tense of fail madi looks like, and what the basic fail mudare looks like. And as I said, we are only going to focus on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are the 8 abwab that we are going to focus on. And I'm going to, in this lecture, even though we discussed this briefly last time, I'm going to give you some tips for remembering this. And then when we look at the Quran and Quranic examples, you will start realizing why understanding and remembering these babs is so important. So let's try and learn, first of all, something about the masdar. With mazid fi, so as a quick recap, why are these called salati mazid fi? They are called mazid fi, they are called salati mazid fi because we still have 3 root letters. So in the various verbs that follow this pattern, af'ala, yuf'ilu, if'alan, there will still be three root letters, the fa letter, the ain letter, and the alif letter. But in addition to these three root letters, we also, in the past tense, have this extra alif that shows up at the start of the verb. So kharaja is one verb. Akhraja would be a verb that is in this form, and we'll see several examples. So it's called mazid fi because in addition to the three root letters, we have something more. With this second one, fa'ala, the ain is doubled. That's what's extra. With fa'ala, we have the alif that shows up between the fa and the ain letter. The fa'ala, here two extra things are happening. We have an extra ta in the beginning, and then the ain letter is doubled. Then in tafa'ala, here there is an extra ta in the beginning, and then there is an alif that's between the fa and the ain. And then ifta'ala, this is bab ifti'al. Here we have an extra alif, and then a ta in between the fa and the ain. Here we have an extra alif and a noon at the start. And here we have three extra letters, alif, sin, and ta. So these babs are called mazid fi because in addition to the three root letters, we have something extra. So that's one point. Another point is that with all these mazid fi babs or derived verbs, by and large, the mastar follows a given pattern. So for verbs that follow this particular af'ala, yuf'ilu, if'alan pattern, the name of the action will always have this pattern. And we'll see this shortly. So for example, a verb which has to do with kicking somebody out or causing somebody to exit, that verb is akhraja. So kharaja is to exit, akhraja is to get somebody else to exit. So akhraja is in the past tense. In the present/future tense of fi'l mudare, it would be yukhriju, and the name of that action would have this pattern. If'alan, so if my root letters are kha, ra, ja, then the name of the action of kicking somebody out or causing somebody to exit would be ikhrajan. So the point is that by and large, the mastar will follow a particular pattern for all the verbs that are in a given bab. There are two small exceptions for this bab and this one. So what I've labeled 2 and 3, we actually have two possible mastars. So with fa'ala yufa'ilu, there is taf'ilan, and then there is another possibility that I will share with you shortly. And similarly with this bab, fa'ala yufa'ilu mufa'alatan, there is another possibility that I'm going to share with you. But for all others, there is only one mastar or only one verbal noun. So a mastar is called a verbal noun because it's the name of the action. There are different ways in which we refer to the mastar, and what I mean by that is the mastar is a noun, and you can immediately see that this is a noun because it has a tanween at the end. Sometimes you might see tafa'ulun. Sometimes if you just pause, so when you do tajweed, there is the concept of waqf. Waqf means that you are going to not say the full thing, you will just stop. So sometimes you might hear somebody say babe tafa'ul. So there we are not saying the full thing. But when you learn, the standard way of learning a given bab is to say the past tense form, the present tense form, and then the mastar form in nasab. So all these are nasab. If'alan, tafilan, mufa'alatan. So when I say, okay, babe if'al, which is the short name for this, the babe if'al, you would learn this as af'ala, yuf'ilu, if'alan. And one reason I think for why we constantly learn this in mastar form is that when these verbs show up in the Quran, or when these mastars show up in the Quran, mostly they are in nasab form. Nasab form, as you might recall, is where you have this double fatah at the end. So point is, sometimes you'll hear babe ifal, sometimes you might hear ifalan. Both mean the same thing. And depending on the context, if that verbal action is being treated as a subject, then it would be written as ifalun. And that again is because this is actually a noun. So all the grammatical rules will be the rules associated with a noun. With fail madi or past tense.
Sir, there is one question over here. There is one question. Can we
go ahead.
Use the dhamma ifalun instead of ifalan? Somewhere it is ifalun. Is it same thing?
Are you talking about the masdar?
Yeah, I'm talking about the masdar.
Yeah, with the masdar, it's ifalan or ifalun. It's the same thing. It's just that if you remember from our earlier lectures, ifalan is when something is an object. Ifalun is if that noun is being used as a subject. But the point I'm making is that when we are going to learn this, so I'll say, okay, tell me the mazi, mudare and masdar for bab fa'ala. You would say fa'ala, yufa'ilu, mufa'alatan. So for now, just take my word for it that to memorize these, when you sort of constantly repeat to memorize, then try to memorize the masdar in the nasab form. And later on, you'll realize why I'm saying this. Okay. With fail madi and mudare, the actions are made before the lam letter. What I'm saying here is that any additions that we make, so whether we are adding an alif or a ta, notice all these additions are happening before the lam letter. So whether it's fail madi or fail mudare, all these actions are happening. So over here we have an extra ayn, here we have an extra alif, here we have an extra ta over here, an extra ayn. All this is happening before the lam. After the lam, there is no action happening or no addition happening with these mazid fi. And as I said before, we'll focus on these 8 derived forms. There are other derived forms also, but with respect to the Quran, these are the ones that show up, and that's why we'll only focus on these 8. And if you learn these 8, you are in good form. Another side remark here, all these fail madi and mudare that I'm showing you here are third person and masculine. So af'ala is third person masculine, yuf'ilu is third person masculine. Obviously yuf'ilu is fail mudare, which means present / future, and af'ala is fail madi, which means past tense. And then, as we'll see later, the conjugation for changing third person these are actually third person masculine singular, third person masculine singular. So to convert into third person masculine plural, it will be the same rule that we have studied before, and I'll get into this later. This might look like a lot, and to some extent it is, but all of us have to learn it at some point. And if we try to learn it and then we keep practicing it, for example, when we read the Quran today, we will see examples of these different babs. And if we keep studying the Quran and keep thinking about which bab a particular verb corresponds to, it will just make it easier to remember. So here, I'm going to say a few things which will make it relatively easy for you to spot the right bab. Because when you read, for example, in the Quran and you see the verb akhraja, so when you see akhraja, that sounds like af'ala, same pattern as af'ala. So you should immediately be able to say, okay, this is babe if'al. So if'alan, this is also called babe if'al. All right, now I'm going to share with you how I have learned these, and then you can choose to learn it any way you want. But basically, the way I categorize this is, there is this first bab which shows up a lot, af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. This is the only one where we have a alif with a fatha in the beginning. So af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. So this is one category. So I'll call this category A, where we have alif with a fatha in the beginning. And in this category, Fail mudare, we have a ya with a dhamma, yuf ilu. Now, you might say that this looks like, if you think about nasara, if you think about the mazid fees, there also we have a ya in the beginning, but in all the regular salati mujarrad, like nasara, yansuru, daraba, yadribu, there will always be a fatha on the ya with the 6
Unless
earlier
it's a
babs.
passive form.
Unless
with the
it's
passive form, it becomes
exactly.
fish.
But here, very good point. If it's a passive form, it's a dhamma. But here we are just talking about the regular. With the passive form, there will be, another difference that we'll get to later. But right now, let's just focus on the regular form. With the regular form, the 6 regular salati mujarrad will always have a fatha on the ya. So that's with the 6 babs. Over here, we have a dhamma. Then this next category, I call this category B, begins with a fa. So the madhi begins with a fa, and then there is ayn, which is doubled. That's over here. And then with the next one, there is an alif that's added. So this is fa'ala, yufa'ilu, taf'ilan. And then, so I'll call this B1 and this B2. So with B2, we have fa'ala. So fa followed by an alif. Fa'ala, yufa'ilu, mufa'alatan. So category B begins with a fa. Then we have category C. Category C is starting with a ta. The fa'ala. And now notice this ta is not the ta that we use for second person. This is a ta which is because of mazid fi. So it is a particular kind of bab. The fa'ala, so C1 is sort of like B1 in the sense that the ayn is doubled. And C2 is sort of like B2 in the sense that the alif is added after the fa. So C1 is tafa'ala and C2 is tafa'ala. And then we have, this is category D. What's special about category D is that it starts with an alif kasra. So that's D1, D2 and D3. So alif kasra over here and a ta in the middle. Ifta'ala, yafta'ilu, ifti'alan. Then D2 has this extra noon after the alif. Infa'ala, yanfa'ilu, infi'alan. And category D3 has 3 letters in the beginning. Alif kasra, then seen and ta. Istaf'ala, yastafilu, istif'alan. All right. Now, a few more words in terms of trying to remember this. And again, I know this might sound like a lot, but just bear with me and keep working with me through this. And if you work hard, eventually you will get it. So with Madi, we have all fathas except the last 3 where alif has a kasra. So now to remember these patterns, if you look at Madi, in general, we have all fathas. Af'ala, fa'ala, fa'ala, tafa'ala, tafa'ala. This is tafa'ala. But then the only exception is D1, D2, D3. Here the alif has a kasra. Other than that, you can, when you are trying to learn this, just remember all fathas except for the last category, which is the D category, where we have alif kasra. So that is so that's this point. Mudare always ends in dhamma. So notice, so with fail mudare, the standard is to always have a dhamma at the end. The first 3 mudare have a dhamma on the present tense indicator and kasra on the ayn. So if you look at category A and B, over here, the mudare indicator, which is the ya, has a dhamma, and the ayn letter has a kasra. So that's this point. For the next 2, C1 and C2, which are basically tafa'ala and tafa'ala, the mudare has all fathas. So then we have all fathas. And then for the last three, the alif is replaced by ya and ain letter has a kasra. So for the D category, the ain letter has a kasra, and the alif kasra, think of it as a weak alif, that is dropped. So in general, when we go from madi to mudare, the alif is dropped. All right. So obviously, I don't expect you to just remember all this based on what I've said. For me, honestly, I've written this down and I keep revising it, keep looking at it, and I just try to keep remembering this. And then when you read the Quran and you try to identify, okay, I see this word akhraja or ittakhaza, then when you try and figure out, okay, which bab is this, that way, that's how you will actually remember. Okay, now we'll go one by one through the different babs, and I'm going to give you several examples. Hopefully with the Quran that we have read, many of these words that I'm going to use will sound familiar, and one way of learning this is through familiar words. So let's take babe if'al. So how do you remember babe if'al? You say the madi, the mudare, and the masdar. Af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. Af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. So this is the pattern for the madi, yuf'ilu is the pattern for the mudare, and if'alan is the pattern for the masdar. And I'll give you 4 examples just to hammer in this particular bab. So, and I want you to do this. If the root letters are the khala, can you make the past tense, the madi, mudare, and masdar using these 3 letters? So I want you to do this now. So, actually, let me just pick some names. Okay, Shahrukh, why don't you start? So dakhala.
Yeah, sure.
Can you make
adkhala? Yeah, so mazi would be adkhala.
Yeah.
Mudare would be udkhilu, and masdar would be idkhalan.
Very good. So the mazi would be
Khala.
khala, all fathas. The mudare would be
Yudkhilu.
yudkhilu, and the masdar would be
Idkhalan.
idkhalan. Okay, so this is for dakhala. What about for noon, za, lam? So Dr. Ghani, if you can do that. Or somebody else. So
Anzala. Farooq.
Okay, Farooq.
Sorry, I was muted.
Anzala.
Anzala yunzilu inzalan.
Yunzilu and
Inzalan.
Inzalan. And one last one, which is very helpful for us to remember. Let's take kaf, ra, mim. So what would the fail madi be?
Akrama.
Okay, yeah, akrama.
Yeah.
Then
Yukrimu.
Arif sahab,
Yeah.
what would akrama mean?
I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to all the meanings. First, right now, I'm just helping you practice the forms, and then we are going to get into all the meanings based on, what this bab means. But obviously, I want you to be thinking both in terms of recognizing the pattern and the meaning. So first we get the pattern, then we talk about the meaning. And that's what we'll do with all these babs. But it's good. Ultimately, the meaning is what matters. So yukrimu and the masdar
ikraman,
ikraman. You'll notice that once you start doing this, you'll see a lot of words in Urdu. So your Urdu will actually improve once you understand these babs better. Ikraman. Okay, so here are some great examples. Okay, so adkhala yudkhilu idkhalan, anzala yunzilu anzalan, akrama yukrimu ikraman. All these follow the pattern af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan, and all these are bab if'al. Okay, now what in general is the meaning communicated by bab if'al? With bab if'al, generally, and as you've probably realized, these are not 100% hard and fast rules. These are just guidelines, and there will always be exceptions. But the general guideline is that when you have babe if'al, it changes fe'le lazim, which is intransitive. So for example, dakhala means to enter, whereas babe infal changes this into transitive, so causing somebody else to enter. So letting, to admit somebody. So to admit somebody would be adkhala. Adkhala in the past tense, madi, yudkhilu present / future, and the name of that action of admitting somebody is idkhal. Okay. Next one. Anzala yanzilu anzalan. So nazala, just regular nazala means to send down. Nazala means to come down, whereas anzala means to cause something to come down, which means to send down. So when the Quran is sent down by Allah, the word anzala is used because the Quran was sent down by Allah. So anzala yanzilu inzalan means sent down. So notice nazala, to come down, is fail lazim or intransitive, whereas anzala is muta'addi. A muta'addi verb will require an object. So when Allah sends something down, what does Allah send down? The object is needed. Anzalallahu Qur'anan. So Allah sent down the Qur'an. Akrama yukrimu ikraman. So akrama means to give respect. All right, so akrama means to give somebody respect. Yukrimu is the present tense form, and ikram, this is a word also used in Urdu. So when you say ikram karna, that's the name of the action associated with giving respect. All right, so obviously ikram means you are giving respect to somebody else. So it is a fail muta'addi. Ikraman is the name of that action, so that is the masdar. All right. So, Shahrukh, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how it relates to karoma. So karoma means to do karam, to kind of be generous, I guess, or so.
Yeah, karama means akrama basically means to show respect, to be gracious with somebody else.
Okay.
And
what does karoma mean? The
karoma,
original word.
The original word. That also, you see, these words have often very similar meanings, and sometimes,
Right.
at least at our level of understanding, the different babs can have reasonably similar meanings. I can, you know, at the end of the session, I can look up the exact dictionary meaning and the difference in there. And I'm actually, if you want, I can also recommend a Quranic dictionary that highlights the differences between these different babs. But
Yeah, that would be nice.
The two key points I want you to take away from this: one is the ability to create, to recognize the pattern. So when you see akrama, you need to recognize which bab this is. And you also need to recognize the meaning. Okay, so just to test you, what does kharaja mean?
To exit.
Okay, what do you think? And what I'm saying here doesn't always apply, but it helps. So how would I put this into babe ifal form, past tense?
Akhraja.
So in the babe ifal, it would be
rajan,
Akhraja.
akhraja. What do you think akhraja means?
to like kick someone out or to throw
Exactly,
someone
exactly.
out.
Akhraja means to kick someone out. So is there a relationship between kharaja and akhraja?
Yeah, akhraja is like causing someone else to exit. So.
Exactly. So kharaja is exiting oneself, akhraja is causing oneself to exit. So with some verbs, this point over here, you know, that causing somebody else, this is very clear. Also, nazala is come down, anzala send down. So sometimes the distinction is very clear. For other verbs such as karama versus akrama, that distinction might not always be that clear. All right, that's why always this window of, you know, potential exceptions, always keep that open. This is fairly structured, but it's not still, these are not like laws of physics that they'll not be violated. So they're like general rules of thumb. Okay, so hopefully we have a good sense for babe if'al. Anybody has any questions on this so far? So everybody just repeat after me. Af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. If'ala. And the way you can remember this, with each of these, there should be one example that you should also learn, because af'ala yufilu if'alan, this is not an actual, you know, set of words. So sometimes it's easier to learn using an example, and the example I want you to learn is akrama yukrimu ikraman. So say this: akrama yukrimu ikraman.
Akrama
yukrimu
Ikraman. All right, akrama yukrimu ikraman. This is your classic example for af'ala yuf'ilu if'alan. All right, so that's babe if'al. Okay.
Arif, can we just go over the meanings for very quickly? So akrama is to respect, or he respected.
Yeah, to show
Sorry.
respect. To show respect to someone else.
And karama was respects.
Yeah, karama. Karama. I don't have the exact meaning in front of me. So before this class, I looked up the exact meaning of akrama yukrimu ikraman. That is to show somebody else respect. The exact meaning of karama or karuma yakrumu, that I can check at the end of class. But obviously, it has something to do with respect. What is the exact difference between karama yakrumu versus akrama yukrimu? That I can get back to you.
The first one is mazi, then muzare,
Yeah, mazi.
and then
This is modare, and then this is the masdar.
what does masdar mean? Actually, the word
Masdar means the verbal noun.
Okay.
It means the name of the action. So the name of this, so if I'm showing you respect, that action, the name of that action is ikram. In Urdu, you say कि उनका बुजुर्गों का ikram करो. Right? That's ikram is coming from here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next. Babe taf'il. So babe taf'il, fa'ala yufa'ilu taf'ilan, and this is one of two babs where there can be one of two masters. So taf'ilan and taf'ilatan. So here again, let's just take a few examples. So if we have ayn, lam, mim, so ayn, lam, and mim, so fa'ala would become allama, yufa'ilu will become yu'allimu, and taf'ilan will become
Taliman.
Exactly. So does this sound familiar?
Yeah, talim.
Yeah, exactly. The Urdu word talim comes from here, right? So actually taliman. So taliman. So allama, yu'allimu, taliman. Okay, so that's one example. What if you know, another verb that is quite okay? What about noon za lam? Noon za lam.
Nazzala.
Nazzala, yunazzilu, and then this would take this form, the masdar taf'ilan. Tanzilan. Does that sound familiar? Tanzilan.
Yeah,
You
occurs a
now,
lot in Quran.
it comes a lot in the Quran. Tanzilan, that's the name of the action. Okay, what about Sod Ra Fa? Fa.
Sarafa.
Sarrafa. So this would become Sarrafa.
What did Sarafa mean? Just Sarafa?
Sarafa means frequent turning and twisting around. So this is often used for winds. So as winds twist and turn,
Oh, okay.
you know, Sarrafa, Yusarrifu, Tasrif Riyah, the frequent twisting and changing. Riyah is winds. So the Madi is Sarrafa. What would the Mudare be?
Yusarrifu.
The Mudare would be Yusarrifu. And what would the Masdar be?
Tasrifan.
Tasrifan. So Tasrifan is the name of that action. So Tasrifan would be the frequent twisting and changing, and that actually is often used for winds. Another verb which takes on this form, but it has some huruf-e illat in it, so I won't spend too much time, is zakka, to purify. Zakka, yuzakki, but the masdar then takes this form. So zakka, yuzakki, tazkiya. Tazkiya means the act, the name of this act of purifying is called tazkiya. So when you say tazkiya in nafs, that's where this is coming from. So zakka is to purify, yuzakki is fail mudare, and tazkiya is the name of the action. And generally with this bab, in addition to this earlier concept of changing something from lazim to mutaaddi, there is also the implication of doing something over and over. So when we talk about sarrafa yusarrifu, the winds keep changing direction over and over. When we talk about allama yuallimu ta'lim, it's the concept of transferring information, transferring knowledge over and over and over. So ta'lim is not just, you know, a one-off thing. Ta'lim is something that has to do with transferring knowledge from the teacher to the student over and over and over. Similarly, nazzala, the Quran came down to the Prophet over and over. It wasn't a one-off action. So when Allah talks about the Quran coming down from Lawh-e Mahfuz to sort of to say Hazrat Jibrail, for that the term used is anzala. So, you know, earlier in my days as I was, you know, learning, all of us are learning, but did anybody ever wonder how could the whole, like in Surah Qadr, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. So what's the verb that's used over there?
Anzalna,
which is the earlier one. This one implies it was sent down in one go. So the Quran was sent down in one go on the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. That refers to where Allah sent the Quran down to, let's say, you know, from
the seventh heaven or something,
to say Hazrat Jibrail, or to the heavens, that sort of the earthly heavens. And then the Quran coming down from Hazrat Jibrail to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there the verb that's used is nazzala, because that action happened over a 23-year period. Okay, so that's why there is a distinction between anzala and nazzala. All right, and similarly, sarrafa, yusarrifu, tasrifan, this refers to winds constantly changing direction. All right, so this is tafeel.
Just a quick question. When you say tasrifan, is that the act of twisting and turning, like of the winds, or
Exactly.
is it the act of causing the twisting and turning when you say tasrifan?
Tasrifan, I think in this case, it is the twisting, the frequent twisting and turning of the winds. So it's not causing it, it's the actual twisting and turning of the winds.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying that this is not always like 100%. Literally, with each of these babs, there's a full book explaining each bab. All right, I've just taken some 2-3 top bullet points. And end of the day, these bullet points just give you a rough indication. Once you become a PhD in Arabic, then you'll be, there'll be a whole semester on each bab. All right. Okay,
Inshallah.
next is bab mufa'ala. Fa'ala yufa'ilu mufa'alatan. How is this different from the previous bab? Fa'ala, exactly. In the earlier bab, we had fa. There was a tashdeed on the ayn. Fa'ala. Now we have an alif. Fa'ala. Yufa'ilu. And then the masdar is either mufa'alatan or fi'alan. Even though when we just say it, we say fa'ala yufa'ilu mufa'alatan, but most verbs here, their name will be in this form fi'alan, and we'll see that shortly. So let's say our root is jim, ha, dal. All right, so what does fa'ala become?
Jahada.
Jahada. What does yufa'ilu become?
Yujahidu.
Yujahidu. And then what? This takes the fi'alan form. So what is the name of the action?
Mujahadatan.
No. If fi'alan, I'm just telling you that fi'alan is more common. So put jim ha da in this pattern, fi'alan.
Oh, jihadan.
Yeah.
Jihadan.
Okay, so jihadan. Okay, so simple jahada refers to working hard. Jahada means doing the action against someone else. So with jahada, it's just I'm like working hard. But when I say jahada, then I'm working hard or struggling against someone or something. So if I'm struggling against my own nafs, or I'm struggling fighting with somebody, or struggling against somebody, I'm engaging in jihad. Jihad automatically means against someone else. So jahada, yujahidu, jihadan. Another popular example is with qaf, ta, lam. So what does that become?
Qatala.
So qatala, yuqatilu. And then what's the name of the masdar? Again, it will take the fi'alan form.
Qitalan.
Qitalan. Okay, do you know the difference between... So what does qatala mean?
To kill.
To kill. What does qatala, yuqatilu, qitalan mean?
To cause someone else to die? Like,
No,
that's
no.
qatal too.
The qital in Arabic, the term for war or battle where you're fighting, where both parties are trying to kill each other or struggling each other, that's qital. Like literally a battle is called a qital. Qatala yuqatilu is where two people are both trying to kill each other. Qatala is A kills B. Qatala Dawudu Jaluta. Right? So A kills B. But if both are trying to kill each other, then that's qital. Okay, so in the Quran, when there is like the Muslims and the Kafir are fighting with each other, then you will see qatala yuqatilu qital, and this is the verb that's used. Attempt to do something to someone else. So both parties are trying to do something. All right.
So does that apply to, like, if I say jalasa, that means I'm sitting with someone, right?
Actually, that's not all verbs will take all these different forms. Like jalasa. So there is a lot more to this. The examples that I'm giving you are the popular examples for every bab. So just because there is qatala doesn't mean that you can take qatala and then put it into every single, as in mechanically you can put it into every bab, but that doesn't mean that the words actually exist.
Okay.
All right, so this is bab mufa'ala. Okay, then we have bab tafa'ul. Okay, so how do you remember this? Tafa'ala, yatafa'alu, tafa'ulan. All right, and if you do it with ain lam mim, ta'allama, yata'allamu, and then ta'alluman. But the one that I want you to remember over here, the one that is more popular, is with qaf, ba, and lam. So tafa'ala, and notice this ta now, and when you are reading the Quran and you see ta in the beginning, you need to recognize whether the ta is a fail mudare indicator or is the ta an indicator that this is bab tafa'ul. So if you see a ta in the beginning and you see the ain letter with a shadda, that means you are dealing with bab tafa'ul. So now I want you to do qaf. So somebody who's been quiet so far. So Dr. Shafiq,
تقبل
qaf ba lam.
تقبل
So this would be taqabbala. So
يقبل
qabbala, and then the next would be, what's this
Yep.
fail mudare? Ya ta qab
يتقبل
yataqabbalu, and what's the name of the action?
تقبل
Ta
تقبل
تقبل تقبل
taqabbulan.
تقبل
So taqabbala yataqabbalu. So taqabbala, and then yataqabbalu, and then the masdar is taqabbulan. This means to accept something, like qabul karna, which involves a compensation. So to try to do something, or sometimes it also involves trying to do something on your own and there is some difficulty or struggle involved, and very often they will also, you would, so for example, taqabbala means you are kabuling or accepting something, but there is a compensation involved. So the point is that when you know these babs, that gives you a sense, but you still need to learn the meanings of the specific verbs. So bab tafa'ul is tafa'ala, yatafa'alu, tafa'ulan. Classic example, taqabbala, yataqabbalu, taqabbulan. All right. We are getting close to the end here. So as you might recognize, there is a lot of work for you to do, and I'm actually going to take an exam now after Eid. So with all these babs, and I'm going to tell you what the exam is on, but you need to learn, spend your Eid in social isolation and learning all the babs. Okay, so bab tafa'ul. All right. So bab tafa'ul. So what's special about this bab? There is a ta in the beginning, fa, alif, and ain. So tafa'ala, yatafa'alu, tafa'ulan. All right, let me give you the classic example for this. The classic example again, let's say with qaf, ba, and lam. So what would this be? So so Aziz Bhai, let Aziz Bhai try. He's been very quiet. So qaf, ba, lam.
تقبل
So this would be the qa, bala, and then yataqabalu, and then taqabulan. Taqabulan. Okay, this means taqabulan So taqabala yataqabalu taqabulan. This means, like in general, this involves reciprocity, doing something to others. And this particular verb, taqabala yataqabalu taqabulan, this means to come face to face with someone. All right, and ta'awana yata'a. So with ayn waw noon, ta'awana yata'awanu, and then ta'awanan. This has a illat, so it's slightly tricky, but this means sort of to cooperate with one another. The example I want you to learn though is this one. So tafa'ala yatafa'alu tafa'ulan. The example is taqabala yataqabalu taqabulan. Okay, Babe Iftial is extremely common. So what's special about Babe Iftial? There's an alif kasra in the beginning, a ta in the middle, and then the rest is ayn and lam. So ifta'ala yafta'ilu ifti'alan. So let's use the root words jim, ta, and noon. Okay, so what does this, so instead of ifta'ala, what would I write?
Ifsana.
Ijta,
Fatna.
Wouldn't it be
ijtana.
istatna? Because it's jatana, right? You said,
No, instead of the fa, you have the jim.
right?
No, actually, no, yeah,
Ijtatana.
no, the jim, and then noon and ba. So,
Oh, jeen noon ta.
yeah,
Janata. Okay.
ijtanaba,
Nata. Ijtanata.
yajtanibu, yajtanibu, and ijtinaban. Ijtinaban. Okay. So ijtinaba, yajtanibu, ijtinaban, those with good Urdu. Do you know what this means? Ijtinab karna. So no one has good Urdu.
To stay away from, or
Yeah, exactly. To
ijtinab
carefully,
to-
ijtinab, like to very carefully protect yourself from something, to carefully stay away from something. So to do
Right.
something very diligently and carefully. So like ijtinab means to carefully stay away from something. So ijtanaba, yajtanibu, ijtinaban means to carefully stay away. Istama'a, this comes, the root is seen, meme, ayn, which has to do with listening. So istama'a, yastami'u, istima'an would be to listen very, very carefully. All right, so to do something, but to do it very diligently and carefully. So that is Babe Iftial. Just, this is the second last one, Babe Infial. Infa'ala yanfa'ilu infi'alan. The classic one is with fa toe ra. Fatara literally means when something sort of splits open and then life or something starts coming out from it. Fatara. So yeah, exactly. Fatara, exactly. Fatara samavati. So over here in fatara, so this would become in. So in fa'ala would become with fa toira. It would become in
Fatara.
in fata. So in fatara. Then what's the mudare?
Yan fatiru.
Yan Patara.
Yan
Yan
Fatiru.
fatiru. And what would this be in fi'alun?
Infitaran.
In fitaran. So in fatara yan fatiru in fitoran. All right. So this actually means sort of to rip apart, or in Urdu we can say patna. So that's what this verb means. In fatara yan fatiru in fitaran. So point here is that this actually changes verbs that are transitive to intransitive, to mutaaddi to lazim. Lazim, so something like splitting or patna, or to rip apart. This is actually an object itself, like the sky is just ripping apart, okay, as opposed to causing something else to rip apart. So infatara yanfatiru infitaran, this is this would be a fail lazim. This is an action happening to an entity itself.
What
Last
does
one.
that mean? Sorry, on the last slide.
In
Passive. What is passive or reflexive of form 1 mean?
passive or reflexive of form 1 means that sometimes if you have a form 1 verb which has an object, so a form 1, if you have a form 1 word like fatara, which takes an object, then to convert that verb into something else that where that same action is happening unto itself, where the object is not required. So for example, I might cause a rock to split. That would be transitive, or that would be something where I'm causing something else to happen. Intransitive is where the action is happening to the entity itself. And if you don't fully understand this, it's not a big deal at all. What you really need to be able to recognize is that when you see infatara yanfatiru infitaran, you need to recognize that this is babe infial with the pattern infa'ala yanfa'ilu infialan. And then in the dictionary, online or paper dictionary, you would then look up the meaning, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this. In the dictionary, you would see this under the root fatara, and then the dictionary will say that this is babe infial. So when you see the word infatara, you need to recognize that infatara is babe infial, and these are the root words. And then in the dictionary, you would look up the meaning of the verb that comes from fatara and is from bab infial. Okay, last
And when
bab.
it becomes, when it becomes intransitive, is the splitting is happening like to the subject?
To itself, right? Like the sky is splitting, right? So the sky is splitting itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last one. Babe istif'al. So istaf'ala yastafilu istif'alan. This bab generally has to do with asking, asking for something. So for example, if you take nasara. Nasara means to help, right? So how would I convert noon sod ra into this form? Istaf'ala. It would be istansara. In fail mudare?
Yes.
Yes, tansiru.
Yes. Tansiru.
Tansiru.
And then what would the name of the action be?
Istinsaran.
Istinsaran. So tin sa run. Okay. So istin saran. What do you think this means?
To seek help?
Yeah, to seek help or to ask for help. Exactly. What does istaghfara mean?
To seek forgiveness.
Exactly. To seek forgiveness, to ask for forgiveness, to seek forgiveness. Istikhara.
To ask for khair.
Ask for goodness. Very good. Right. So whenever you see this bab, it generally means, again, there will be exceptions, but it generally means to seek or to ask for something. All right. So these are the 8 babs that we've covered. Afala yuf'ilu ifalan. And the classic example for this was akrama yukrimu ikraman. Then we had fa'ala yufa'ilu taf'ilan. The classic example for this is sarrafa yusarrifu tasrifan. Then we had fa'ala yufa'ilu mufa'alatan. The classic example for this is qatala yuqatilu and then qitalan. Then we had tafa'ala. So with tafa'ala, the classic example. So tafa'ala, yatafa'alu, tafa'ulan. The classic example is taqabbala, yataqabbalu, taqabbulan. Then we had babe ifti'al. Actually, one second. So with babe ifti'al, it was ifta'ala yafta'ilu ifti'alan. So ijtanaba yajtanibu ijtinaban. Infa'ala yanfa'ilu infi'alan. For this we did infatara yanfatiru infitaran. And istaf'ala yastaf'ilu istif'alan. The example here was istansara yastansiru istinsaran. All right. So these are the 8 babs. I need you to learn them. And I'm just, since we won't, next weekend is Eid, so we won't have class, but I just want to give you a lot of stuff to do. All right. Here is some vocabulary. And you will notice that this vocabulary is related to what we are talking about. So I want you to go over this vocabulary. And then there are lots of exercises. So kharaja, ba'ada, rashada. I want you to put these in the form of babe, if'al. Then these in terms of babe, taf'il. And then if you could somehow try to get an Arabic dictionary, and then in the dictionary, the order is based on the root words. So you would look for kharaja, and then when you look at the meaning of kharaja, you would look for babe if'al, and there you would see the meaning. So just very quickly, kharaja in babe if'al, what would it be in the past tense? It would be ikhrajun. So kharaja would become ikhrajun. So ba ain dal would become ibadun, and so on. All right.
Just
so
a
anyway,
question, Arsa.
yeah.
So each of these root words could be in any of the babs, right? Kharaja can be converted to any of the 8 babs, right?
Technically, yes, but kharaja, in terms of actual usage of words, kharaja will not be used across all 8 babs. So kharaja yakhriju, it would be used in like bab dariba, and then definitely kharaja will be in babe ifal, but kharaja does not necessarily show up in all these other babs. It might show up in a few, and when you open the dictionary with kharaja, you might see babe ifal, you might see 1 or 2 other babs. It's unlikely that for a given set of root letters you will see all the babs.
Okay, so only makes sense.
Yeah, it only makes
in some of the babs.
Exactly. It will only make sense with, or the usage will only be with a few babs. All right. So hopefully you understand this exercise. For each of these roots, you need to come up with the relevant verb given these babs. So that's one. For each of these masters, I want you to identify the root, and then what's the name of the bab. So arsala would be bab ifal, yuqarribu, what's the bab, and so on. So you need to be able to look at words and identify the babs. All right. And then this is, if you have time, but I just want to point something out. Obviously, you might recall a long time ago, if we just took, for example, daraba, and then I made you do the conjugation for daraba. So daraba is 3rd person masculine, so it's singular 3rd person masculine. So then we daraba, daraba, darabu. What does darabu mean? It would be the
They hit.
They hit.
They hit. So, and how would we write it? It would be darabu. Now, if we are talking babe ifal, notice that the ending is always the same way that we had originally. So the way, so all these should look familiar. So for dual, we just added an alif. For jama, we add this waw. For jama feminine, so all the rules that we've discussed before in terms of creating jama, tasniya, all that is still the same. So with second person, remember with second person masculine, we put a ta for masculine, a ti for feminine. If you go back and revise your conjugation for past tense verbs, all those rules will come back. So with each of these babs, when you do the conjugation for the past tense, the rules are the same as what you've seen before. And similarly, for all these babs, the rules when you have fail mudare, maruf means that we are still focusing on the, on the regular. Majhul we'll cover at a later point in time. But all the rules for the conjugation are the same. The action related to mazid fi happens before the lam letter. So the fa, ain, lam, if there is an additional alif or an additional noon or an additional ta, all that's happening before the lam letter. What's happening after the lam letter is telling you whether this is wahid, tasniya, jama, whether it is third person, second person, male, female, and so on. All right. So in the slides that I've shared with you, I've given you all these conjugations.